I love it. I love it. I love it. Look at this. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Hey, I'm not surprised.
What's up, my homies? Leighton here for UFC Gambling Addicts, back again for another UFC full card breakdown and predictions video. This one's going to be Pedro Muhnoz versus Frankie Edgar, but before we get into that, we're going to do what we always do, take a look at last week. I am really sorry that this upload is quite late in the week, but I have a cool story to tell you guys in the smoke break. So yeah, there's a positive to every negative. And if this video came out on Monday, I wouldn't be telling you this story until next week. So positive to every negative. So the quick recap from last week. Kai Kamaka versus Tony Kelly. This was a really good fight to start UFC 252. The fight was going very good for both guys. You know, Kai having that very strong start in the first round. Tony coming back in that second round. Third round really going either way. But then there was a break. There was a break in the action. And I believe that helped Kai more than Tony. So, you know, whatever pick you made on that fight, it was a good pick. You know, that fight really could have gone either way. Second fight, Chris Daukaus versus Parker Porter. Man, you know, this line was a very close line. And I sided with the old school guy in Parker Porter. But, man, that lightness on the feet of Chris Daukaus really was the story in that fight. Just able to use his own angles. And ultimately, his punches were doing far more than Parker Porter. So, massive credit to Chris Daukaus. Lavina Souza versus Ashley Yoder. This was quite a good fight. I felt the difference would be in tension. You know, Ashley Yoder, when she lands, she doesn't exactly look to hurt the opponent. It looks like a sparring match. Where Lavina Souza, you know, octagon name, the Brazilian gangster, you know, she's looking to hurt you in there. And that was the true difference in that fight. Yoder had good moments, used her length very well. But Souza, when she landed, it just looked more damaging. Danny Chavez and TJ Brown. Now we got this underdog on the card. Danny Chavez coming in, beautiful low kicks. Really reminds me of Jorge Masvidal in there. I don't know why, but just the way he holds himself, the way he moves. Chavez, really nice debut. TJ Brown showing a lot of heart in that fight, you know. Ate a lot of low kicks, but never gave up. Werner Jandiroba and Felice Herrig. I took the plus money on Felice Herrig, and a lot of you guys told me, you know, she's had surgery, the 2-year layoff. She's going to have a hard time in this fight. And, you know, the majority of you guys were right. Werner Jandiroba, she got on top. I felt if she ended up on bottom, her BJJ game wouldn't be as effective. But she ended up on top, you know, and that was the first time I believe that Felice Herrig has been submitted. So credit again to Jandiroba. My boy Vince Pichel getting it done over Jim Miller. This was a very back and forth fight, you know, both guys having their moments. But my boy coming on strong, you know, Jim slowing down towards the end of that fight. Vince is a very strong guy, you know, at 155, physically very strong. Just ended up on top. More than Jim Miller. Yeah, credit to my boy in that one. Merab versus John Dobson. The story is Merab is a monster. You know, this guy can hold you against the fence, land 10, 15 knees. You know, John Dodson went back to his corner and said, he's just hugging me. Well, he's not just hugging you, John. You know, he's grabbing a hold of you and he's landing horrible knees. Brilliant performance from Merab. You know, this guy is a problem in the 135 weight class. Moving on to Daniel Pineda and Herbert Burns. You know, this fight was a good fight, man, for one guy, right? Daniel Pineda looked very good making his return to the UFC. Herbert Burns looked to be defeated from the weight cut, but most of the time when you're bigger than the opponent and your weight cut has been a brutal cut, if you're still bigger, you know, there's an advantage there. But not this time. Not this time for Herbert Burns. Daniel Pineda came in and just smashed him. You know, he got the finish on the mat as well. So impressive. Rosenstrike versus JDS. Now, it was going pretty good. It was going pretty good for JDS. But Rosenstrike just kind of... He stopped being in that sparring match. You know, he flicked the switch almost and decided, you know what? I'm going to come at you now. I'm going to try to land a big punch. And he did. As soon as he put himself in that mindset of, I'm not going to do this. You hit me, I hit you, we move. I read you, you read me. He just got violent, and that's what you need to do against JDS. And you look back on JDS, you know, even against Stipe a few years ago, right? Same kind of thing. JDS was landing those low kicks, looking good, and then Stipe just, you know what? I'm gonna come for your head now. And as soon as you do that against JDS, you put yourself in a very good position. Marlon Vera and Sean O'Malley, man. I needed Sean O'Malley. I needed Sean O'Malley in this fight. It didn't happen. A lot of people saying, you know, it was unlucky from Sean O'Malley. His ankle went. It was an injury. But it was an injury inflicted from the opponent. All right? Marlon Vera landed that low kick. And after that low kick, Sean O'Malley was not the same. That's fighting, right? You're looking to hurt your opponent in there. And Marlon Vera is a dog who can take damage. That man can take damage. Sean O'Malley cannot take damage, right? We're starting to see that. You know, injured a few years ago, a couple years ago, and now injured again. You know, this is the fight game. You do have to condition those ankles. You do have to get used to taking brutal kicks in sparring. And Sean O'Malley couldn't take that kick. You know, the leg shut down, the knee shut down. Massive credit to Marlon Vera. You know, he done what he had to do, and that was damage the opponent. Main event, you know, I enjoyed the main event. I did enjoy it. I felt the commentary was very biased. Entering the 5th round, and John Anik with his quote, you know, this could be anyone's fight heading into the 5th round, and it just wasn't anyone's fight. You know, I can kind of see what they were saying. You know, round 1 was close, but Daniel took it because of that knockdown, that half knockdown at the end. Round 2 was also close, but Stipe took that round because of the knockdown at the end. Then the 3rd and 4th round, I felt those rounds were more Stipe, way more Stipe than DC. So, yeah, I felt the commentary a little bit biased, but it's understandable. You know, that is their boy. He does the commentary with him, Daniel. So, yeah, you know, I understand how they're biased, but overall, Stipe just looked good, man. For 25 minutes, he looked very, very good. Daniel couldn't get those takedowns. Didn't go for those takedowns. Bullied up against the fence. And I'm not even going to mention the eye poke, right? Because that's not the reason Stipe won. And I don't believe that was the reason Daniel won when he won. You know, eye pokes happen, right? And apparently it happens a lot in this type of fight between Stipe and DC. But overall, you have to give credit to Stipe. You know, he done the job. And I also think Daniel gave a good account of himself, but just couldn't push on as much as Stipe. Alright guys, let's get into breaking this one down. Fight number 1, we have Mark Striegl versus Timur Valiev. And we're going to start with Mark. So Mark comes into this fight 18 wins, 2 losses as a pro, making his UFC debut. Seems to be primarily a grappler, a wrestler who's putting together his jiu-jitsu too. Many submission wins on his record. It's absolutely no secret what this fighter is best at. I have seen Mark clipped a few times on the feet, but at the same time, there isn't a Floyd Mayweather in MMA, you know? Everyone gets clipped in this sport. The opponent, Timur Valiev, comes into this fight 16-2 as a pro, making his UFC debut. Originally supposed to debut a few weeks ago. Now, I was quite impressed in the tape watching of Timur. His striking ability is up there, especially for a Russian fighter. I think Timur is probably the better fighter overall, striking and grappling. I'm not overly confident in that claim though. Both of these guys have good records, but gun to my head, I'm choosing Timur, and I'll take him via decision. Whoa. Timur coming in minus 500. Mark coming back plus 430. Yeah, okay. So if the gun was to my head, it's looking like a lot of people would make the same pick as me there. But like I said, I'm still not overly confident in this matchup because both of these guys do have good records. But I am more impressed with the Russian fighter. So yeah, that's going to be the pick for that one. But those odds, whoa. Fight number 2, we have Matthew Semelsberger versus Colton Minus. Wow, what a matchup we have here. Okay, starting with Matthew. So Matthew comes into this fight 6 wins, 2 losses as a pro, making his UFC debut. I've watched a couple of his fights today. Seems like a very hungry fighter. Elbow finish, heel hook finish, TKO stoppages. You could say this man doesn't discriminate when it comes to stopping the opponent. Now the opponent, Colton Minus, comes into this fight 10 wins, 1 loss as a pro, making his UFC debut. The number 1 ranked welterweight out of Alaska, 17th ranked welterweight in the whole of the US. Honestly, this fight should be on the Contender Series. I don't know a whole lot about either guy. I think watching this fight, that's where all of us are going to learn the most about both of these fighters. But ultimately, we have to make a pick prior. I'm gonna side with size and hunger. And I see that in Semelsberger. So purely for those reasons, you know, and those reasons, it's not a lot, right? But I don't know a whole lot about both of these guys. And I wouldn't be confident in either side. But if I did have to find that factor, that story in this matchup, I'm seeing size and hunger out of Matthew Semelsberger. So purely for those reasons, I'm going to take Semelsberger via decision. And yeah, look, the odds, they're perfect, right? This fight should be on the Contender Series. No one really knows, you know, who's going to shine in this matchup. Matthew coming in plus 105, plus 100, minus 105. Colton coming back minus 110, minus 115. So the odds are very, very close. But yeah, I'm siding with the plus money on Matthew for that one. Moving on, we have IK Villanueva versus Jordan, the Beverly Hills Ninja, right. And we're going to start with Villanueva. So Villanueva comes into this fight 0 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. We saw IK fight a few months ago, debuted against Chase Sherman. He was basically picked apart in that fight. He was undersized, couldn't close the distance to become effective. He's now dropping down to 205, which in my opinion is a good move. IK hasn't got the frame for heavyweight, so he should have a better time in this matchup. Now the opponent, Jordan Wright, comes into this fight 10-0 as a pro, making his UFC debut. Training out of Jackson Wink. From watching tape, Jordan seems to be primarily a ninja. He loves to kick, really loves to kick. Jordan actually has some decent TKO wins so far in his career. But there is a problem. It took 7 pro fights for Jordan to fight a guy that actually won a fight. You know, that's a real problem. You know, it took 7 fights for him to fight a guy that had won a fight. You know, that's not just a padded record. That's an extremely padded record. You know, that's a problem. It's always difficult deciding whether or not the guy with the padded record is actually that good, or the level of opponent just hasn't been good enough. Therefore, he looks better than what he is. Personally, I'm going to give IK a bit of respect. IK may not be the best fighter, absolutely nowhere near it, but he has 16 wins. This will be his 27th pro fight. He needs to make it dirty though. Sherman had space to work with his boxing. If Jordan has space to spin and kick constantly, then Villanueva isn't going to do well in this fight. He needs to stay on Jordan, look to knock him dead, just make it dirty in there. And if he can do that, I think Villanueva has a good chance in this fight. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Villanueva via TKO in round number 2. And I don't believe we have any odds for this matchup, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jordan Wright was the favourite. Maybe minus 150, minus 170. But if Villanueva can close that distance, keep it really dirty in there. Don't let Jordan have that space to spin, land high kicks, land body kicks and low kicks. I think he could take that O. So I'm going to stick with Villanueva there. Dwight, the body snatcher Grant versus Kalen Bourne. And we're going to start with Grant. So Dwight Grant comes into this fight 2 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. Basically robbed in his UFC debut. Although Grant wasn't really active in that debut too. So can kind of see how the decision went against him. After that fight, Dwight then stopped Carlo Pedasoli. Really, really nice TKO in that one. Most recently, winning a split decision over Alan Jaban. I actually felt Grant lost that one, but, kind of made up for the debut robbery. So, yeah, it's even now. Dwight has a lot of power. Not the most output, though. Likes to really read his opponent. Give that intimidating vibe to his opponent. Let the opponent know, look, when you come in, I'm going to snatch the body. I'm going to snatch your brain. That type of vibe. The opponent, Kalen Bourne, comes into this fight 6-1 as a pro, making his UFC debut. Another guy debuting on this card. From the tape I've seen, Kalen is just a smasher. Closes distance pretty quickly. There isn't a feeling out process. Kalen wants to bully you with big strikes very early. If you end up going down, he'll look to mount you and smash you. I even see him get it looked like a top pressure submission. I think he put the forearm or the shoulder into the throat of the opponent, but it just looked like the opponent tapped from top pressure. It was crazy. In my opinion, it's really a who the hell knows type of fight. Dwight Grant hasn't got that style of let me smash you quickly, whereas Kalen has got that style. But what if Kalen looks to close the distance with that bully mentality and Grant just lands a huge bomb the way he did against Pedasoli? Either style could win. For me, I'm going to stick with Dwight Grant. He should anticipate the early storm, look to move and counter. So I'll take Dwight Grant via TKO in round number 2. And I'm interested to see the odds on this one. No, don't worry. We don't have any odds on this one. Let me know in the comments though. Who are you going to put a favourite? Who are you going to put as the favourite for that matchup? Because that's a difficult one, Kalen has that style where I could see him doing well. But Dwight Grant also has the style where I could also see him doing well. It's one of those ones, man. It's a tough decision to make. But for me, Dwight Grant is going to be the pick. Austin Hubbard versus Joe Solecki. This is a really good matchup. Let's start with Austin. So Austin comes into this fight 2 wins, 2 losses inside the UFC. A well-rounded fighter. Really proved a lot in his last fight. Was able to keep the wrestler on his feet. Really showed us his ability to pick apart a fighter. His takedown defense has never been bad. It's always been hard to take down Austin Hubbard. But man, he has improved on it still. That last fight against Max Roscoff really showed us his ability. His boxing, his 1-2s, his jabs. And like I said, the improved takedown defense that he didn't really need because it's always been hard to keep down Austin Hubbard. You know, if a guy like Marco Madsen is finding it hard to keep you down, you have to take note of that. You know, Austin Hubbard is a physically strong dude. The opponent, Joe Solecki, comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC, coming off a really decent debut performance over the old school fighter in Matt Wyman. Joe is primarily a jiu-jitsu fighter. That's where he excels. 7 submission wins in his pro career to date. This is a very tough matchup to predict, like I said. Joe hasn't got that wrestling vibe that Austin has kind of struggled with in the past, but he's still slick enough to take your back up against the fence or even trip you to take your back. Austin will look to keep this standing. I'd say he has an advantage on the feet, not a massive advantage though, because if he overcommits on his strikes, that'll leave Joe an opportunity to take him down. It's a super tough pick to make, but I'm going to side with Joe Solecki. I just think he'll have a couple more tools to get this one done. Really could be wrong though, because this is a tough one to predict. But the pick is going to be Joe Solecki via decision. And yeah, the odds, man, is perfect, right? Joe Solecki, really slight favourite, -125, -130. Austin Hubbard, rightfully so, a very small underdog, +110, +115. Really could go either way. If you're picturing Joe winning this fight, you're going to see takedowns here and there. If you're picturing Austin winning this fight, you're picturing him stuffing a few takedowns, keeping it on the feet, and landing a few big shots in these rounds. But for me, it's going to be Joe, but I wouldn't be surprised if Austin got it done. Mizuki versus Amanda Lemos, and we're going to start with Mizuki. So Mizuki comes into this fight 1 win, 0 losses inside the UFC. Had quite a close debut fight against Wu Yinan. The story was Mizuki was just a little cleaner in that fight, faster and cleaner with everything that she was doing. She is primarily a striker, a karate practitioner, I believe, who came from Invicta, as most of these female fighters do. The opponent, Amanda Lemos, comes into this fight 1 win, 1 loss inside the UFC. She's coming off a win over Amanda Granger. I believe I went against Amanda in that fight too. She proved me wrong though. Got the fight to the mat. From there she used her BJJ, sunk in that choke and got a nice first round win. Again guys, this is another one of those fights that you can just see going either way. I'm slightly leaning towards the karate side, speed and cleaner strikes landing. Maybe a bunch of low kicks adding up for Mizuki. The flip side is, this fight will happen in the small octagon. Maybe Amanda is able to dirty Mizuki up against the fence, potentially take her down. It's a really tough one to decide on, but for me, I'm siding with the striker. That karate style, speed, and just a little bit more to offer when it comes to moving and kicking, you know. That's what I feel will be the story more in this fight. So purely for those reasons, I'm going to take Mizuki via decision. Really tough one to decide on though. Yeah, the odds are perfect, man. Mizuki coming in -140, -125. Very small favourite. Amanda Lemos returning a very small underdog. +105, +110. Even turning -101 on some sites, you know. That one really goes either way. You can see how the fight could play well for Amanda, especially being in the small octagon. But if Mizuki can get into a nice rhythm of moving and kicking, get that distance established early, she could really have a good time too. So yeah, it's a who the hell knows type of fight. For me, I'm going to go Mizuki. Alright my homies, you know what time it is. If you waited to smoke with me, amen. If you've been smoking the whole time, amen. If you're not a smoker, but you enjoy the smoke breaks, triple amen. All right, my homies, we're not going to do breakdown goals this week, all right? I'm a firm believer in you get what you give, you know? What you give in this life is what you get, right? And last week, I am not happy with my main card picks, right? At the same time, I'm sure a lot of you guys out there right now are thinking, listen, don't beat yourself up, man. You know how this game works. You make a pick. Sometimes you're right. Sometimes you're wrong. But I expect more of myself, you know? And listen, that mindset is true. It really does go one way or another. But I'm not going to do breakdown goals for this one, right? I believe last week should have gone better for the main card than what it did. We hit plus money on Chavez, but ultimately, I'm a believer in you get what you give. You know, I'm not going to ask for what I believe I deserve this week because ultimately last week I'm not happy. So this week, we're not going to do breakdown goals. Now, for those of you who do want to know, you know, did we hit the breakdown goal of last week? We nearly hit 200 subscribers, so we didn't get that one, but we was very close. We didn't hit 500 likes, but again, we was very close. As for the channel memberships, we smashed that one. We got like 8 or 9 channel memberships. So, you know, all of you guys who are on the channel membership, thank you very much. Thank you for sticking with me, and I hope we can smash this card. I really do. But like I said, man, in life, you get what you give. If you give your utmost, if you really, really give your utmost, man, you're going to get the results from that. Right? So this week, we're not going to do breakdown goals. You know, you guys are going to give me what I deserve this week, right? If I get 150 likes, 200 likes, that's what I deserve. If I get 100 subs less, that's what I deserve, right? If there's no channel memberships coming in, that's what I deserve this week, right? So, yeah, amen to all of you guys who are sticking with me. You're great people. I love you guys. Now, for the story that I said at the start of this breakdown, I have a cool story to tell you guys in the smoke break. And I'm going to tell that story now. So, yesterday, I was doing the MMA training, hour and a half of MMA training. And right towards the end of the session, we was just drilling some Muay Thai techniques, right? So it was going low with the kick, going high with the kick. And then your partner drills on you, back and forth, right? And towards the end, I hear some people chatting behind me. Obviously, you know, if you hear some voices behind you, you're not going to turn around and check. You're just going to keep going with your drill, right? The drill finished, right? The buzzer went. I turned around. Arnold Allen and Steve Aimable I just stood behind me chatting like, what? It's not every day you're in an MMA class, turn around and Arnold Allen and Steve Aimable just stood behind you. Like, it surprised me a little bit. But yeah, all the pros came in after the MMA class had finished, and obviously that's when they were starting the MMA sparring. I had to stay for that. You know, I had to stay and watch all of that. You know, all of these pros sparring. And the people I was drilling with, you know, I don't know if they knew who had just walked into the room, but it seemed like they didn't, right? No one fist bumped Arnold Allen. No one. I was kind of surprised, you know, but I stayed for that. You know, I had to stay and watch that. Arnold Allen trains at TriStar, as most of you know, but when he's home, he trains at the gym I train at. So, yeah, all of the guys, man, from last night, so many pros sparring. And it was decent to watch it, man, up close. These guys were cracking each other, guys. I'm telling you, they weren't going 100%, but man, it was close. It was like a strong 80%. Even Sean Carter, my MMA coach, getting ready for his fight coming up, he was putting in work last night. All of them, man. It was really, really good to watch that. And, you know, I was just sat there like, I'm going to be in this room. I'm going to be in this room soon. I'm going to work towards it and nothing is going to stop me. You know, the work is going to be put in. The work is getting put in. And yeah, man, it was just so cool to watch that. I really, really want to be in that room, be one of those pros who's going hard, going 80%, helping your teammates out. So yeah, that was the story that I wanted to tell you guys, man. Arnold Allen just casually walking in the room with all the other pros. It was a fun thing to watch, man, and I really, really want to work towards that. But that doesn't mean to say that I don't want to, improve this YouTube game, because I do. I want to build an empire here. And if I can become a pro at some point, you guys have been there every step of the way with me, right? And I'm going to stay true to you guys, right? Every week I'm going to do this breakdown and prediction game. And every single day I'm going to focus on becoming a better fighter every single day. So yeah, let's get into breaking down this main card, guys. Like I said, there's no breakdown goals for this one, but I appreciate every single person who's sticking with me on these breakdowns and predictions. All right, guys, let's get into it. Takashi Sato versus Daniel Rodriguez. What a matchup this is. Let's start with Takashi. So Takashi comes into this fight 2 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. In all honesty, I think Sato has done some nice stuff so far. Beautiful TKO in his debut. Although he was beat by Barriault, he showed us quality in that fight. His most recent performance was over before you could even get back from the toilet. Really, really clean TKO win over Jason Witt. The opponent, Daniel Rodriguez, comes into this fight 2-0 inside the UFC. I speak about Sato looking good in the UFC. So does Daniel Rodriguez. Debut win over the veteran, and then went a full 15 minutes showcasing his determination against a very hungry fighter in Gabe Green. This is a brilliant match, brilliant matchmaking to start this main card. Rodriguez has that 10th planet BJJ along with heavy striking. Sato should be more movement orientated in this fight, looking to set Daniel up with a knockout punch. In the smaller octagon, I would probably give the advantage to Rodriguez. He won't have to chase Sato. He won't have to chase him around the octagon. But I think Sato is good enough to game plan for the smaller octagon too. It's a really, really tough prediction to make. But I'm going to side with Takashi Sato. I just think his striking's a little bit more unorthodox than Daniel Rodriguez. But he will have to be careful. Like I said, it is the smaller octagon. And Daniel Rodriguez is a hard hitter. That guy's got a lot of power with good BJJ. Really tough fight to predict. But I'm going to side with Takashi Sato. Maybe picks up a few points as the fight goes on. Interested to see the odds on this one though. We have Sato coming in plus 150, plus 160. So plus money on that one for me. Daniel Rodriguez returning minus 180, minus 190. Can understand why, arguably better BJJ than Sato, more power, fighting out of the southpaw stance too. So yeah, this is a good matchup. But for me, I'm going to side with the plus money on that one. Maria Agapova versus Shana Dobson. And we're going to start with Maria. So Maria comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC. Primarily a boxer inside the octagon. We saw her debut against Hannah Cyphers. Domination is an understatement. She blew Hannah out the water. Really showed us what she's about. And that's punches in bunches. Really quick hands. You can see the confidence she has in her hands too. I'm going to say this now. Maria Agapova might be a real problem in this 125 weight class. The opponent, Shana Dobson, comes into this fight 1 win, 3 losses inside the UFC. Also primarily a striker from what we've seen. A boxer. Coming off a knockout loss to a fighter that's known for taking a lot of damage. The Zombie Girl. This fight, in my opinion, has Maria Agapova domination written all over it. I don't want to say 100% Maria wins, because this is MMA, anything can happen. But man, I'd say 95% Maria uses her boxing to piece up Shana in this fight. So I'm going to take Maria Agapova via TKO in round number 1. Just think she's a higher level of boxing. Oh my god, minus 1,200, minus 1,500. Maria Agapova, Shana Dobson plus 1,000. Yeah, so is there anyone taking Shana Dobson? Let me know in the comments if you're taking Shana. And let me know why, right? Even if it's, listen, the odds I have to, right? Even if you think Shana's going to lose, tell me that in the comments, because, man, those odds are incredible. But how, I mean, you could argue that it's too high. Maybe argue that she should be minus 800. But yeah, that's insane. It's understandable though. Maria Agapova had a great UFC debut. Mike Rodriguez versus Marcin Prachnio. And we're going to start with Mike. So Mike comes into this fight 1 win, 3 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a striker who isn't having much success with his striking. Either out-grappled or getting knocked out. This could be make or break for Mike. He has to show improvements in this fight. Just look to be first. Don't second guess himself, because I have noticed his confidence isn't where it should be when he's fighting at the highest level. The opponent, Marcin, comes into this fight 0 wins, 2 losses inside the UFC. A karate practitioner, suffered knockout losses in both of his UFC fights. Sam Alvey with his boxing, Magomed with a picture perfect high kick. This could also be make or break for Marcin. Both fighters will have to show improvements in their game, and that makes this fight exciting on its own. Marcin may look to land more kicks, whereas Mike may look to land with his boxing more. Seeing as Mike isn't coming up against a wrestler, I think he should be able to impose his will in this fight, especially in the small octagon. Marcin isn't going to have the space to use his karate. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if either guy got it done. But I do have to side with Mike Rodriguez. I just think he's more of a dangerous guy, especially in the smaller octagon in this style matchup. You know, Marcin will have to use space to get those kicks going. And Mike just has to be more confident in there. Believe in his ability to strike. You know, he isn't coming up against a brilliant wrestler. So stylistically, I think this fight, it makes more sense to be on the side of Mike Rodriguez. But like I said, it's make or break, arguably, for both of these guys. Don't be surprised in either result. But my pick is going to be Mike Rodriguez via TKO in round number 1. And the odds are a little bit one-sided. You know, Mike Rodriguez coming in minus 250, minus 220. Don't exactly agree with that. Marcin coming back plus 190, plus 200. It's make or break for both of these guys. So I don't know how we could have Mike Rodriguez minus 240, minus 220 when he's 1-3 inside the UFC, you know. Yeah, the pick is going to be Mike, but yeah, the odds, it's a little bit off, you know, quite a bit off, let's be honest. Co-main event, we have OSP versus Alonzo Menifield, and we're going to start with the veteran. So OSP comes into this fight 12 wins, 9 losses inside the UFC. A veteran's veteran. A veteran of the Von Vlu choke. OSP stepping back down to his natural weight class of 205, and rightfully so. He just didn't have the size or power to keep Ben Rothwell away from him in that heavyweight fight. We will get vintage OSP in this matchup, using a variety of kicks, competing pretty much anywhere the fight goes. The opponent, Alonzo Menifield, comes into this fight 2 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. Primarily a power puncher, a fighter that's looking to take your head off in that first round. Looking back at his last fight, we see the result of Alonzo not being able to take your head off in that first round. He slows down, becomes very inactive, and ultimately loses that danger he possesses in the first round when he finds himself outside of that first round. OSP is quite a slow starter, so I do think Alonzo will have a good chance to find that kill shot in the first round. But like I said, the flip side is, if the veteran makes it out of the first round, he'll probably go on to win the next 10 minutes. Maybe even stop Alonzo late. For me, it's one or the other, right? I'm going to side with round 1 destruction though. If OSP starts slow, the way I anticipate, that really leaves Alonzo with a good chance. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Alonzo Menifield via TKO in round number 1. Man, the odds are right, because in that first round, Alonzo Menifield really does have a good chance. But outside of that, you would expect the veteran to go on and maybe finish the fight or even win those 10 minutes quite comfortably based on experience, conditioning, cardio. The odds are Alonzo minus 125, OSP returning plus 110. And it's so understandable, you know, it makes sense. For me, I'm going to take the first round, Alonzo Menifield, but man, the plus money really could come in if OSP stops that first round, you know, doesn't get caught. So yeah, really tough one to decide for that co-main. But for me, I'm going Alonzo. Alright, my homies, main event, we have Pedro Muhnoz versus Frankie Edgar. And we're going to start with the Brazilian. So Pedro comes into this fight 9 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. A super high level jiu-jitsu fighter who has evolved into quite a nasty striker too. You only have to go back and look at the damage he gave No Love. Really targeted the calf that set up the punches later on. Really evolved in the game of mixed martial arts has Pedro Muhnoz. The opponent, Frankie Edgar, comes into this fight 17 wins, 8 losses inside the UFC. A veteran of the game. Frankie has seen it all, he can do it all. Absolutely, towards the back end of his career, arguably should hang up the gloves. A brilliant wrestler, a brilliant competitor. Just a little washed up now, you know. Damage starting to accumulate too. He was stopped by the Korean Zombie in devastating fashion. Just never looked like he was in that fight. The better wrestler is Frankie. The better jiu-jitsu fighter is Pedro. The better boxer is probably Frankie. But I'd say the better kicker is Pedro. It's actually quite an even main event. I'm sure we're going to be split on this fight. But the story for me is, if Frankie chooses to wrestle, he really puts himself in danger of that ground game that Pedro has. If it stays upright, it's a close fight, most likely. But I think Pedro, being the fresher guy, maybe has enough to even edge out Frankie on the feet. Ultimately, though, I think Pedro could submit Frankie at some point. Especially, you know, if Frankie goes back to that base of taking you down. You know, he's a brilliant wrestler. And if he does choose to do that, really gives Pedro Muhnoz a chance to use that high-level jiu-jitsu. But yeah, the pick has to be Pedro Muhnoz, man. The work he done against Cody Garbrandt, beautiful. You know, I took Pedro Muhnoz in that fight. A lot of people surprised with how well he done on the feet. A lot of people saying that Cody just, you know, hasn't got fight IQ. He got himself knocked out. You know, that's just not true. Just like it's not true that Sean O'Malley just injured himself. You know, the opponent did that. Pedro Muhnoz injured Cody Garbrandt and was able to stop him because he forced such damage on the calf. Overall, I have to pick Pedro in this fight. I think his striking has really come along over the years, and the jiu-jitsu is always there. You know, his jiu-jitsu is very, very high level. My pick is going to be Pedro Muhnoz via submission in round number 3. And we're going to check the odds for this last fight. Wow, Frankie Edgar coming in plus 220, plus 210. Pedro returning minus 220, all the way up to minus 270, you know. So a lot of faith going into the Brazilian. It's understandable, you know, this guy really has evolved over the last few years. And now getting the chance to fight a brilliant veteran in Frankie Edgar. Alright guys, if you've enjoyed this breakdown, please let me know. I always enjoy giving you guys my opinions on all of these fights. And I love hearing your opinions too in the comments. So let's get engaging for this card. Alright, peace.